you want to know what it is. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me. This is the construct. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
So a lot of people have been saying Deepwoken is in its worst state that it's ever been. So I decided I'm probably going to make this video for the third time about why Deepwoken is the way that it is. Because honestly, I feel like Deepwoken, it started off great, the potential was there, it was definitely there. But I feel like their vision just wasn't clear. And they made a bunch of errors, and because of that, they ruined something that could have been really great. So in this video, I'm going to go over, at least my points on why I think the game is in this position that it's in right now. From my perspective, as somebody who's been playing since day one, like literally hour one of release, I'm going to just say everything that I've noticed, what I feel like the game did wrong. I'll put the timestamps in the description so you can skip to different sections, and yeah. So without further ado, my biggest issue with the release of Verse 2 was the combat changes that were made to the game. A lot of people may not agree with me on this, but with verse 1's combat, it was practically fine. There weren't any issues with it. I mean, there was move stacking for a time period, but that was eventually nerfed. The main issue the developers had was that they felt like fights were too long. They just said fights are taking too long, everybody knows how to parry, so we're gonna make the punishment for parrying even worse, and we're gonna give everybody tempo burst, which is essentially just a get out of jail free card. You would combo someone and they would be able to press one keybind and you would just be boom kicked off of them, and then you would go to attack them again and then boom kicked off of them again, over and over and over again. As long as they had enough erudition, they could keep doing whatever the fuck they wanted. On top of that, I feel like during verse 2, like the balancing was just very bad. Like they were just releasing things that weren't making sense in terms of mantras, like permafrost prison, flaming scourge. Verse 2 just brought a bunch of like weapons into the game. Not even just weapons, mantras, talents, oaths that were just too unbalanced. Like Salt Chemist, Jet Striker was fine, but it was just the running aspect. You can't fight someone who's always running away from you. And now it got to the point where a Jet Striker at a time was just the strongest oath because it had combat and then everybody would just run. So if you're low, you can just run away and there's nothing your opponent can do about it. I mean, you could literally scale any wall. Additionally, for an update that we waited almost 2 years for, it came with practically no new islands. All we got was Miner's Landing, and that's, I don't even consider that an island because it's just a building and like a path. You go up, you follow a path, and then boom, island ends. There's nothing to explore. It's not immersive. You could say Meteor Isle was a new POI, but it's just a block in the middle of the ocean. There's nothing to explore there. The biggest thing that we got was layer 2, and even then I don't think layer 2 was good for the game because they just made enchants way easier to get. Everybody's walking around with an enchant, and I know you guys hate it when people are like, oh, enchants should be rarer, but if you have something that's rare, it gives it value. Back in verse 1, when enchants were rare and legendary weapons were rare, it gave those weapons value. You didn't just see your average Joe running around with a Gladius enchant. That's something rare. So what people would do is they would use like a Worshipper longsword with like Storm on it because it had an enchant, and then they would use like lightning with it. Now it's just like, oh, you just get whatever weapon you want and then you just go down and then you go get your enchant stone and then boom, just like that, you have the perfect weapon. Then they have this shit where you can put different criticals on other things. Like it takes away from the weapon's identity, and this seems to be a reoccurring trend in like terms of Deepwoken updates. The game just keeps catering to people being lazy. Like you no longer have to do this anymore, you can just do this. You no longer have to uncap anymore, you can just do that. Like the game is just becoming Deepwoken easy mode. I mean, it literally says in their description that it's supposed to be a difficult game, but Deepwoken doesn't feel difficult. Weapons aren't difficult to get, enchants are common as fuck, and if they're not common, there's 2 confirmed ways in the game that you can get an enchant. Legendary weapons aren't hard to get. Like, what is difficult about Deepwoken? The most difficult thing about Deepwoken is getting on and deciding to play. It feels like there was a vision, and the vision has just been lost, and now they're just kind of doing anything. I feel like a lot of things just weren't balanced and tested for like practicality. Like Star Kindred, right? On paper it sounds like a nice fun oath idea. Then when you implement it, you get what? You get bird builds, you get people easily running. If somebody has Star Kindred in the depths, you're never catching them. Salt Chemist sounds good on paper until you actually play against it, and it's just a guy just popping potions every second, throwing potions, running around. You can't do anything. I just feel like verse 2 missed its mark. It could have been something really great. What I thought we were gonna get when we got Eastern Luminant was like at least 3 new islands on Arisia's level. If we're waiting almost 2 years for this, if we're waiting this period of time, why was there only like 1 island that was able to get built? All Eastern Luminant was just half of the islands moved to a different instance, and then they added 1 new island and a stupid rock that they called an isle, and then they just called it a day and said that was it. The balancing is horrible. There's so many broken things. There's so many things that are just utterly unfair. It'll make the game fun, and In verse 1, it was just never an issue. I mean, verse 1, the simpler times, and I'm not saying this out of like, oh, I'm blinded by nostalgia, but sometimes game developers just do too much and they begin to mess up the project that they had originally envisioned. Like, Chime used to be something that you could go into just to like, you could go into Chime to literally progress your build. You would get EXP off Chime. I would remember staying up all night just playing Chime and getting XP, and I would hit power 60. You would go to Chime to fight and test your build. Now you go to Chime, it would just be some guy trying to stall for zone because everybody cares about elo. There's no reason to gank anymore. You don't drop enchants anymore. Even if you could drop enchants aren't rare. Legendary weapons aren't rare. You can get anything easily, so there's no incentive to doing anything. Why would I get on Deepwoken? To what? Play ranked all day and hit Godseeker? Okay, what now? What rewards do you get for ranked? Nothing. What am I doing with that? Nothing. Okay, I get a colored name. What is that doing for me? You have no incentive to get on the game. You have no incentive to gank. You don't gain anything from ganking other than just ganking if that's what you want to do. At that point, why don't you just play a Battlegrounds game if you're just gonna fight mindlessly? Now, I'll give Deepwoken its props for updating the game every week, but the content that the game adds still feels very lackluster. Like, compared to updates we've had such as Chime, Bloodrend, Iron Sing, those like are actual like meaningful content updates. Every week we just get a new legendary weapon and like 2 new talents. And I'm not being ungrateful, but it's like, where is Conquest? Where is Central Luminant? Where are all these big updates that people are really paying attention and looking forward for? Every single week it's just a new legendary weapon or something that nobody's really focused on. Give us quality content updates that we want. Look at this guy Agamatsu, bro. This game is his life. I feel bad for him. What can he even post on, bro? All he can do is just keep going in circles. I recently saw this photo that someone took of him where he has to apply to a job, and honestly that just breaks my heart because there's just nothing, there's no content to record on Deepwoken, bro. Their latest update, they added a fucking worm that does nothing but wiggle. What are the devs doing, bro? Where is Conquest? Where are the important updates that people actually care about? The devs can't balance anything. They drop a weapon, and then once they drop it, for like the first 3 days, it's just overpowered as fuck, and then they quickly gotta go and nerf it. When the Chorus of Agonies dropped, OP, nerfed it the next week. Pyre's Keeper first dropped, OP, nerfed it the next week. Nocturne first dropped, OP. Like, can they ever just balance anything? Why does everything have to drop crazily unbalanced and then they gotta nerf it the next week to the point where it's not viable anymore? We barely get content as it is, and then when we do get content, it'll just be subpar or severely imbalanced to the point where it's unenjoyable. Content updates just feel lackluster. World events were just a letdown. They aren't interesting at all. They're not intriguing. They were fun for the first week, but there's just no point in doing them now. They weren't what they were hyped up to be. Really, all anybody's waiting for is Conquest, and they've been dangling that over our head for how fucking long now. Honestly, yes, Deepwoken updates weekly, but their updates don't really feel entertaining. It's frustrating, bro. Being one of the OG players, like, there was a time period where everybody was waiting for verse 2, and we did nothing but just play all day with no updates at all. And it was like Deepwoken had like a max player base of like 3K players. If you were there, you know what I'm talking about. It was an era where Deepwoken had like 3,000 players at most every day, and we would do nothing but just gank all day because there was nothing to do. This is before like Chime was ranked, and we would just wait for verse 2. We would just wait for verse 2 every single day. And they're doing the exact same thing with Conquest. It's a repeated behavior. We've been waiting for how long? Even longer than we waited for verse 2. And Conquest is just nowhere to be found. They're even taking content from Conquest and putting it out in the weekly updates. So what are we really doing? Why is it impossible? Why is it so hard for these devs to push out a big quality update rather than small tiny ones that are imbalanced?